The things I saw up on that mountain, they stick to you like the frozen mud of February. I can still smell the diesel smoke mixed with the sulfur, that sharp metallic tang of blood that never quite went away. People talk about heroes. They talk about medals. I just remember the cold and the sound of men calling for their mothers. My name is Miller, Doc Miller, they called me. K Company, 34th Infantry. We were stuck below Cassino, looking up at that monastery like it was the eye of God judging us. It wasn't God, though. It was the German guns, dug-in beep, spitting steel every time we twitched. I never carried a rifle. That was my rule. I was a medic. My job was to patch holes, not make them. I had my pouch, my morphine syringes, and that canvas bag full of bandages and sulfanilamide powder. That's all I needed. Sergeant Mack used to chew me out about it, said I was a liability, walking around in a war zone with nothing but a pair of scissors and a Red Cross armband. But I told him, Sarge, if I pick up a rifle, I stop being a medic. I become just another target for the Jerry snipers. He just grunted, spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the frozen dirt, and walked away. Mac knew, deep down, that when the screaming started, I was the only thing standing between his boys and the casualty reports. We've been in the line since the new year, trading ground for blood, inch by bloody inch. The slopes were treacherous, a mix of jagged rock and slick clay. Every time the engineers tried to clear a path, the German mortars would bracket the area perfectly. You couldn't dig deep enough. The ground was granite under a thin layer of topsoil, and every foxhole felt like a shallow grave waiting for its occupant.
The silence was the worst part. Not the absolute silence, that never happened, but the silence between the barrages. It was a dense, heavy quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. You could hear the wind whistling through the fragments of shattered trees, and sometimes, if you strained, the low, guttural cough of a German sentry maybe 200 yards up the slope. You'd sit there, shivering, rationing the last sip of lukewarm coffee, knowing that any second the sky would tear open again. I remember Private Finch. Kid couldn't have been more than 18, fresh off the boat from Ohio. He'd been with us 3 days. 3 days of non-stop shelling. He was huddled next to me during a lull, clutching a worn photo of a girl in a polka dot dress. He kept whispering, "Doc, do you think we'll ever see sunshine again?" I told him, "Finch, there's a whole lot of sunshine back home. Just gotta keep your head down until we get there." 10 minutes later, the first shell hit. It wasn't a standard mortar round. It was heavy stuff, maybe 150 millimeters. It landed right on the lip of the trench, 50 feet away. The concussion felt like a giant fist punching the air out of your lungs. Finch didn't even scream. He just went limp, his helmet rolling off into the mud. Shrapnel had taken him across the chest. I crawled to him, ignoring Mac yelling about incoming fire. My hands were shaking, but the training takes over. You don't think about the danger, you think about the bleed rate. I ripped open his jacket, trying to find the source, but it was too much, too fast. I gave him a shot of morphine anyway, just so the pain wouldn't take him before the darkness did. I held his hand until his grip went slack. His eyes were still wide open, reflecting the gray sky. That's what Cassino did to you. It took the young ones first, the ones who still believed in flags and glory.
The battle that broke us, the one that led to the madness, happened 3 days into March. Command had ordered another push up the northern slope, a desperate attempt to flank the monastery's defenses. It was suicide, and everyone knew it. But orders are orders. Our squad was part of the support wave, supposed to secure the ridge once the first wave breached the wire. The initial assault went sideways almost immediately. The Germans had zeroed the entire slope. It wasn't just machine guns. It was concentrated artillery fire, the kind that turns earth into slurry and men into mist. It sounded like 1,000 freight trains derailing simultaneously. Boom, crack, hiss, shriek, boom! The earth jumped beneath us. We were pinned down tight in our firing positions, watching the chaos unfold 50 yards ahead. The air was thick with smoke and dust, visibility dropping to almost nothing. You could hear the screams cutting through the noise, sharp and terrified. "They're cut to pieces," Mac yelled, his face black with soot. "They can't pull back. They're pinned." I knew he was right. The first wave, maybe 50 men, had made it halfway up the slope before the counter-barrage hit. Now they were scattered among the rocks and craters, bleeding out. They were close enough to hear, but too far to reach under that continuous hail of lead. I saw Corporal Jensen try to crawl back. He made it maybe 5 feet before a burst of automatic fire stitched a line across his back. He crumpled, his hand still reaching toward our lines. "Doc, stay put." Mac grabbed my arm as I started to rise. "You go out there, you're dead. They've got the whole killing zone sighted in." I looked at Mac. He was a good man, seen too much, but his eyes were hard with fear. Not fear for himself, but the fear of losing more boys unnecessarily.
"Mac, listen," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the roaring in my ears. "There are at least 20 men out there, maybe 30. They need plasma. They need immediate dressing. They won't last an hour if we wait for the shelling to stop. And you know damn well the shelling won't stop until midnight." He shook his head violently. "It's an open field of fire, Miller. The Jerrys are watching every inch of that slope. They're shooting everything that moves, medic or not." "Maybe," I conceded, tightening the straps on my medical bag. "But I have to try. That Red Cross flag is supposed to mean something, Mac. If I don't go now, those boys are gone." I didn't wait for his permission. I just swung my legs over the lip of the foxhole. The moment I stood up, the noise seemed to drop away. It was an illusion, of course, but that's how fear works. Everything narrows down to the single, terrifying task ahead. I took 3 deep breaths, tasting the stale air and the grit. I adjusted my helmet and pulled the Red Cross armband higher up on my sleeve, making sure the white field and the red symbol were clearly visible against the gray of my uniform. It felt ridiculously flimsy, like I was wearing a paper shield against a cannonball. "Miller, you crazy son of a bitch, get back here!" Mac's voice was a desperate shout, lost almost immediately in the renewed sound of a distant machine gun. I ignored him. I took my first step out of the trench, moving from the relative safety of the fortified line into the exposed killing zone, no man's land. The ground was slick with mud and littered with spent brass and the terrible, silent debris of combat. The first few yards were the hardest. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. I focused on putting one boot in front of the other, keeping my body low but not crawling. I needed to move with purpose, demonstrating that I was a medic, not a combatant.
The German positions were high above, hidden in reinforced bunkers carved into the rock face. I knew they were watching. I could feel the cold weight of their optics trained on my back. "Don't run, don't look up." That was the mantra. I reached the first casualty, a private named Rodriguez. He was lying face down near a blasted olive stump. His leg was pinned beneath a large rock that had been dislodged by a shell burst, and the lower part of his uniform was saturated dark red. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Rodriguez, it's Doc Miller. You're going to be fine, but you need to stay still." He groaned, his face pale and slick with sweat and grime. "My leg, Doc. I can't feel my foot." I quickly assessed the situation. The bone was clearly fractured, likely compounded, and the rock was too heavy for me to move alone. I gave him a quick shot of morphine and started applying a pressure dressing to the worst of the bleeding above the ankle. As I worked, the machine gun fire intensified, not aimed directly at me, but bracketing the area, sending dirt and rock fragments flying just inches from my head. It was a warning shot, loud and clear. "We see you, American." I looked up toward the German lines, the dark, jagged outline of the bunkers. I raised my hand slightly, pointing to the Red Cross on my sleeve, a silent plea for the basic decency of the Geneva Convention. I finished bandaging Rodriguez, securing the dressing tightly. I couldn't move him yet. I had to stabilize the others first. "I'll be back for you, son," I promised, tapping his shoulder. "Hang on." I pushed off, moving deeper into the field of fire. The smell of burning cordite was overwhelming now, stinging my eyes. The ground rose sharply here, making every step an effort. The next man was 30 feet away, slumped against a boulder. It was Sergeant O'Malley, a tough, old veteran from Brooklyn. He was conscious, clutching his abdomen, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Doc," he rasped, his eyes wide with pain. "They got me good. Gut shot." A gut shot in this environment was usually a death sentence. Infection was inevitable, and getting him to surgery was impossible right now. I knew the drill. I pulled out my plasma pack, precious, life-saving fluid, and quickly started the IV drip into his arm. Then I focused on cleaning the wound as best I could and packing it with sterile gauze to try and contain the internal mess. As I worked on O'Malley, the German machine gunner changed his rhythm. Instead of bursts, he fired a long, continuous stream, hitting the rock directly above our heads. Pock, 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 pock. Shards of granite rained down. It was a clear demonstration of control. They weren't trying to kill me yet, but they wanted me to know that they could stop me any time. I felt a surge of cold anger, a feeling I rarely allowed myself. Not at the Germans, they were just doing their job, but at the sheer absurdity of the situation. Men dying for a few yards of rock, while the rules of war hung by a thread, dependent entirely on the whim of a sniper high above. "O'Malley, you gotta talk to me," I urged, trying to keep him alert. "Tell me about Brooklyn. Anything." He managed a weak smile, blood flecking his lips. It's loud, Doc, but the Dodgers are playing this year. Tell Mac I owe him $5. "You tell him yourself, Sarge," I insisted, finishing the dressing. "You're going to be fine. Just hold on to that dot." I left him there, the plasma dripping slowly, buying him time. I had to keep moving. I could see the dark shapes of men scattered further up the slope, perhaps 24 more, all waiting. The field was treacherous. Every step was a risk. I had to step over the body of a man I didn't recognize, his face buried in the dirt. I checked quickly. No pulse. No time to mourn.
The hardest part of being a medic isn't the blood, it's the triage. It's the moment you have to decide who gets the last dose of morphine and who you have to leave behind because they are already gone, and there are 3 other men screaming for help right now who still have a chance. I continued my slow, deliberate path upward toward the worst of the wreckage. The air was getting heavier, and the smell of gunpowder was so strong it tasted like metal. I was breathing shallowly, trying to conserve energy. As I rounded a large, smoke-blackened crater, I saw the biggest cluster of wounded, maybe 10 men, huddled together, some conscious, some not, all bleeding. They had clearly taken cover there when the barrage started. And then I saw him, Captain Davies. He was the commander of the first wave, a young officer, brave to a fault. He was sitting up, leaning against the crater wall, holding a field dressing to his side, his face pale gray. But he wasn't screaming. He was directing the others, telling the walking wounded how to apply tourniquets, despite his own injury. "Doc Miller," Davies cried out, relief washing over his strained face. "Thank God. We're getting chewed up here. We need help fast. Private Johnson needs his leg tied off. Sergeant Klein took shrapnel to the head. He's fading." I nodded, surveying the scene. This was the center of the disaster. This was where the 30 men would start. But before I could even open my bag, the German fire changed again. This time, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't indirect. A heavy caliber machine gun, maybe an MG-42, opened up from a position further up and to the right, a nest I hadn't noticed before. The bullets weren't aimed at the men in the crater. They were aimed squarely at the ground 10 feet in front of me, tearing up the earth in a vicious horizontal spray. They are cutting me off.
I dove instantly behind a small rise of earth, the sound of the rounds impacting the rock behind me deafening. The dirt rained down on my back. The message was clear. You've treated 2 men. That's enough. Go back or die. I lay there for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs, tasting the copper tang of fear. My training told me to retreat. My survival instinct screamed at me to run back to Mac's foxhole. But I looked at Captain Davies, who was staring at me, his eyes pleading. And I looked at the 10 men in the crater, and the 20 others scattered further down the slope I had yet to reach. I reached into my bag and pulled out a fresh packet of gauze. I took another deep breath, ignoring the gunfire. I knew what I had to do next. I had to walk right through that line of fire. I had to gamble everything on the sanctity of that little red cross. If they were going to kill me, they were going to have to do it while I was treating a wounded man. I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees. Then slowly, deliberately, I stood up again, right in the sightline of the machine gunner. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I simply turned my body slightly so the red cross on my sleeve was facing the enemy line, and I started walking forward, straight into the hail of bullets that was still churning the ground ahead of me. I took the first step, then the second, heading directly toward the wounded men in the crater, daring the machine gunner to pull the trigger. The noise was overwhelming. The smell was choking. The silence of the German gunner, however, was what I was waiting for. I walked 5 steps, 6, 7, and on the 8th step, the machine gun fell silent. The MG-42 stopped its furious chatter.
I was in the middle of the field, completely exposed, standing in the sudden, ringing, terrifying silence. I didn't look back. I didn't look up. I just kept walking toward Captain Davies, my medical bag clutched in my hand, knowing that the real work, the impossible work, was just about to begin. I had crossed the line. Now I had to find a way to get 30 men back across it with me. I stood there, fully exposed, the silence rimming in my ears louder than any barrage. It was the sound of a gamble paying off, or maybe just a delay before the execution. I didn't waste the moment. I moved quickly, dropping down into the crater next to Captain Davies. Davies looked worse up close, his uniform soaked dark on his left side. He was breathing in short, shallow puffs, trying to mask the pain. "Doc, I didn't think you'd make it," he whispered, his voice rough. "I'm here now, Captain," I said, already tearing open the sterile wrapper for a large abdominal dressing. "We need to get you stabilized. Who's worst?" "Johnson," he pointed without hesitation. "Legs gone bad. Tourniquet's holding, but he's losing consciousness. And Klein, head wound." Triage, the cold arithmetic of survival. I worked on Davies first, not just because he was the officer, but because he was the mind trying to hold this pocket of wreckage together. I packed his wound, injected him with morphine, and told him to breathe deep. Then I moved to Private Johnson. The kid's face was the color of ash, his boot was gone, and the shredded remains of his trousers showed the makeshift tourniquet, a belt cinched tight just above the knee. It was a good effort, but too long in place. The leg was already cold. I reinforced the dressing, gave him a plasma drip, and checked his pulse. Weak, thready. He needed surgery now, not in 3 hours. He was a litter case, priority 1.
Sergeant Klein was next. Shrapnel had grazed his temple and he was bleeding steadily, but the wound looked superficial, mostly shocking blood loss. I cleaned it with antiseptic, applied a tight bandage, and checked his pupils. He was concussed but alive, a walking wounded eventually. There were 8 others packed into that crater, all with various levels of shrapnel wounds, broken bones, and deep lacerations. My hands moved automatically, ripping cloth, dusting sulfanilamide, tying knots. I used up half my morphine supply in 10 minutes. The Germans watched. I knew it. Every time I looked up, the harsh, angular outline of the monastery on the ridge felt like 1,000 eyes trained on my back. The air remained still, thick with the scent of pulverized rock and something metallic, like burnt pennies. After 20 minutes of frantic work, the immediate bleeding was mostly controlled. I stood up, stretching my aching back. The count was terrifying. 10 men stabilized here. O'Malley and Rodriguez were waiting further down the slope, and I could see the dark shapes of maybe 18 more scattered between us in the American lines. 30 men. All needed to move now. "Captain," I said, kneeling beside Davies again, "we have to move you all. This truce won't last. Do you have any men who can walk, even with assistance?" Davies nodded weakly. "Private Gomez, shrapnel in the arm, but he can use his legs. Stevens took a hit in the shoulder, but he's conscious. And maybe Klein if we keep him slow." "Good," I affirmed. "They are now my stretcher bearers. We need litters." We didn't have litters. The first wave hadn't carried any. We used what we had. I found 2 heavy canvas sheets, probably 10 sections, ripped and stained, and we lashed them to long, straight branches snapped off a splintered olive tree. Improvised litters, clumsy and weak, but better than nothing. I organized the first run. Johnson and another man with a severe chest wound, Private Harris, were the first priority. They were the heaviest, the most critical. Gomez and Stevens took the front poles of one litter. I took the back. Klein, dizzy but determined, helped carry Harris. "Listen up," I told them, my voice low but firm. "We move slow, deliberate. No running. If you run, they shoot. We are medics now. We are moving casualties. We are not fighting." I adjusted my helmet, making sure the red cross on my arm was visible. I found a piece of white sheet, torn from a parachute flare package, and tied it to a stick. It was small, pathetic, but it was my flag of truce. I held it high. We started the slow, agonizing descent. The ground was uneven, treacherous. Every step jarred the wounded men, and they muffled cries of pain. I walked backward, facing the German lines, holding the white scrap of cloth up. I felt like a sacrificial lamb leading the procession.
Every muscle in my body was screaming, waiting for the crack of a rifle shot that would end the whole charade. We were 50 yards out of the crater when the silence broke. It wasn't a shot. It was a sound I hadn't heard in days. A single clear shout, guttural and sharp, echoing down the slope. It was German. "Halt! Stehen bleiben!" We froze instantly. The litter poles dropped slightly, causing Johnson to gasp. I raised my hands, still clutching the small white flag. I didn't speak. I just pointed down to the wounded men, then pointed to the red cross on my arm. The silence returned, heavier this time, thick with judgment. Then a voice, slightly clearer, this time in heavily accented English, drifted down. It was a command, not a question. "Only the medic walks free. The bearers must return. 1 trip, then we evaluate." I swallowed hard. They were laying down the rules of engagement, and they were strict. They were allowing me to save lives, but only at their pace. 1 trip.
I shouted back, my voice strained. "I am Miller, medic. I need to move 30 men. I will return immediately." There was no immediate answer, only the wind whistling through the fragmented pines. I looked at Gomez and Stevens. Their faces were gray with terror, but they held the litter steady. "Keep moving," I ordered softly. "Don't look up, just walk to our lines." We continued the slow march. The remaining 50 yards to the American forward positions felt like 5 miles. Finally, we reached the lip of Mac's trench. Mac was waiting, his rifle lowered, his jaw slack. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Behind him, the other men of K Company were peering over the edge, stunned into silence. "Miller, you son of a—" Mac stopped himself, seeing the casualties. "Get them down! Get the corpsmen here!" I helped lower the litters. Johnson was barely conscious. Harris was in shock. I didn't wait for congratulations or questions. "Mac, listen to me," I barked, grabbing his arm. "They're watching. The Germans let us take 2. I need 4 fresh carriers immediately, and I need 2 more litters, real ones, if you have them. I'm going back for O'Malley and Rodriguez next, and Captain Davies." They let you walk?" Mac stammered, disbelief etched on his soot-streaked face. "They set the rules. They said 1 trip. I need to make the 2nd trip right now before they change their minds." Mac snapped out of his shock. He was a soldier, and organizing logistics was his specialty. "Get Private Jones and Riley up here. Grab the lightweight litters from the cache. Move it." The relief crew was fast. 2 fresh, strong men, Jones and Riley, reported immediately. We grabbed 2 proper canvas litters. The extra weight of the supplies felt comforting. I turned back to the slope. I didn't look at Mac. I just started walking back up the hill. I had to prove I was keeping my word. I was returning immediately. The 2nd trip was quicker, fueled by adrenaline and the knowledge that the path was temporarily open. I reached Rodriguez first. He was still pinned, but the morphine had dulled the worst of his pain. "Doc, you came back," he mumbled, a weak smile on his face. "Of course I came back, Rodriguez. We're getting you out." Jones and Riley, working with the desperate strength of men under observation, managed to shift the heavy rock enough for us to slide Rodriguez onto the litter. The sight of his mangled leg made me wince, but we secured him tightly. We moved to O'Malley. The gut shot was bad, but the plasma drip was still working, buying him precious minutes. He was conscious, though barely. "Dodgers, Doc," he wheezed. "Don't forget the Dodgers." "I won't forget, Sarge. Let's go home." We loaded O'Malley onto the 2nd litter. We had 4 men carrying 2 critical casualties, moving slowly up the incline, away from the German positions, back toward the American line. As we moved, I looked up. High on the ridge, near where the MG-42 had opened up earlier, I saw movement. A German soldier, maybe an NCO, was standing, clearly visible against the sky, binoculars raised. He wasn't aiming a weapon. He was observing. He was the one holding the leash. I raised my white flag again, a slight, almost imperceptible salute. He didn't acknowledge it. We delivered O'Malley and Rodriguez. I gave Mac the update. 4 down, 26 left. The worst are still up there, Mac. We need continuous rotation. I can't carry them all, and I can't stay in the open forever. Mac's eyes were calculating. "We can spare 4 men at a time, Miller.
But if the jerry guns open up, they pull back immediately. You understand? You're on your own if the shooting starts." "Understood," I said. It was a fair military compromise. I couldn't ask him to risk his whole company.
I took a sip of water, quickly checked my diminishing supply of plasma, and started back up for the third time. My legs were starting to burn, and the smell of the mud, now mixed with fresh blood, was making me nauseous. This time, I went straight back to the crater. Davies was weakening, but he was still directing the survivors. "Doc, they're getting cold," he reported. "We need blankets and more water." I had no blankets, but I gave the men my remaining field rations of water and chocolate, small comforts that counted for everything in that hellhole. I picked the next 2 litter cases, a kid named Slocum with a severe chest wound, and a private who had lost his hand to shrapnel, bleeding profusely. Davies used his remaining strength to organize the walking wounded, the men who could hobble but couldn't carry. There were 4 of them now, including Klein. "Captain," I said, "I need you to organize the movement of the walking wounded. When I get the next litter cases back, you start moving your group slowly down the slope. Keep the Red Cross in sight." Davies nodded, grimacing. "We'll follow your lead, Doc. Just keep coming back." The third trip was the most terrifying yet. As we loaded Slocum, a German mortar, maybe 81mm, landed far down the slope near the American lines. It wasn't aimed at us, but it was close enough to send a clear message. Our patience is thin. Don't push your luck. The carriers flinched violently. I had to physically grab Jones and Riley to keep them from dropping the litter. "Easy, boys," I whispered, my voice tight. "That wasn't for us. That was a warning to Mac. Keep moving." We delivered Slocum and the hand casualty. Mac was frantic. "They're shelling the line, Miller. You need to stop. It's too hot." "They're shelling the perimeter, Mac, not the field," I argued, out of breath. "They're showing dominance. If they wanted us dead, they'd hit us now. We have to keep moving before they decide the show is over."
I pointed to the crater. "Davies is organizing the walking wounded. They're coming down now. Get them stabilized and back to the field hospital." I grabbed 2 extra canteens and started back up again. This was a race against time and German temperament. As I ascended for the 4th time, I saw the walking wounded, 4 pathetic figures staggering down the hill, using each other as crutches. They moved agonizingly slowly, but they moved. They were following the rules I had inadvertently established: slow, visible, non-threatening movement. I passed them halfway up the slope. Klein looked like he was about to collapse, but he gave me a thumbs up. "Go, Doc," he managed to gasp. I reached the crater again. Davies was still there, slumped against the rock, his breathing now visibly labored. He was the most critical case left. "It's your turn, Captain," I said, leaning over him. "No, Miller," he coughed. "There are still 3 litter cases here who can't talk. Take them first. I can wait." "You won't wait long, Captain," I captained, checking his pulse again. It was fading. "You're bleeding internally. You are my priority." "That's an order, medic," Davies insisted, his eyes focusing with a remnant of command authority. "Take Private Thomas, shrapnel in the abdomen. He's young. He has a better chance if he goes now." I hesitated. I was trained to obey officers, but my triage instinct screamed that Davies was crashing. But if I defied him, I risked breaking the morale of the survivors. I conceded. "All right, Captain. Thomas goes now. You are next. Don't move." I organized the extraction of Private Thomas and another casualty with a broken spine. 2 more litters, 4 more carriers, organized by Mac, met me halfway. The sun was starting to dip behind the mountain, casting long, purple shadows across the killing zone. The cold was seeping into my bones, deep and permanent. I had been in no man's land for nearly 2 hours. I had moved 10 men, 4 litter cases, 6 walking wounded, 20 left. I started the 6th ascent. My muscles were screaming protest. My chest felt tight. I was running on fumes, adrenaline, and the stubborn refusal to let the Germans win this small, personal war of attrition. When I reached the crater this time, it was nearly empty. Only Captain Davies and 2 other men remained. Private Jenkins, who had a badly fractured leg, and a nameless infantryman who was unconscious, perhaps dead, I wasn't sure. Davies was fading fast. His skin was clammy, and he was staring straight ahead, not seeing anything. "Davies," I called, shaking his shoulder gently. No response. I checked his pulse. It was a shallow flutter. I quickly administered the last of my available plasma into his vein, hoping for a miracle. I had to get him out now.
I went to Jenkins, quickly splinting his leg with scavenged wood and securing it tight. "Jenkins," I said, "I need you to crawl. Use your good leg. Davies needs the litter." Jenkins, a tough kid, nodded silently and began the slow, painful process of pulling himself down the slope, dragging his useless leg behind him. I went back to Davies. I couldn't move him alone, and I couldn't wait for the carriers. I grabbed him under the arms, trying to lift him gently. He was dead weight. "Please, Captain," I muttered, grunting with effort, "don't die on me now." Just as I managed to get him draped over my shoulder, the silence broke again, not with a machine gun, but with a different sound, the sharp, metallic clank of something heavy hitting the rock nearby. I froze, fearing a grenade.
I looked down. Lying 10 feet away, perfectly centered, was a German helmet. Next to it, a field dressing kit wrapped in heavy canvas, the kind the Wehrmacht used. I stared at it, utterly bewildered. Then, from the German observation post above, the same accented voice called down, louder this time, tinged with impatience. "Hurry, American. The cold is coming. Use the supplies. We do not want the night shift to find you." It was an order, a gift, an ultimatum. They were giving me aid, but telling me their tolerance had a strict time limit, sunset. I dropped Davies carefully and scrambled to the German kit. It was packed with fresh bandages, antiseptic, and even a small flask of schnapps, probably meant for pain relief. The supplies were invaluable. I tore open a fresh dressing and applied it to Davies' seeping side wound. I realized what this meant. The Germans weren't just observing the Geneva Convention, they were actively, if grudgingly, participating in the rescue because they respected the audacity of the one-man truce. I grabbed the helmet and the kit. I quickly checked the last casualty, the nameless man, still unconscious, pulse faint. I used the German bandages to secure his arm wound. I radioed Mac using Davies' field radio, which was miraculously intact. "Mac, I need 2 carriers immediately. Location, the main crater. Bring an extra litter. We have 3 more. And Mac, bring a white sheet, large one. I need to make a bigger flag." "Miller, what the hell is going on up there? We heard a clanking sound." "No time, Mac. Just send the carriers now, and hurry. I have supplies, but the clock is ticking." The carriers arrived quickly, running low. We loaded Davies first, securing him gently, then the unconscious man. Jenkins continued his agonizing crawl. I stayed behind, waiting for the final run. I used the German helmet as a marker, placing it clearly visible on the highest point of the crater lip, next to the small white flag I had started with. It was a sign of the strange, temporary alliance forged in the mud. I still had about 10 men scattered further down the slope, the ones I had passed over in the initial rush to the crater. I had to retrieve them before the light died completely. The air was turning purple and gray. The cold was now ferocious. I started my next descent, alone again, carrying the large white sheet Mac had sent up. I reached the first casualty, a private named Hayes, who had a bullet wound in his shoulder and was shivering violently. I wrapped Hayes in the white sheet, making sure the cloth was draped widely across his body. I gave him a shot of morphine. "Hayes, you're going to crawl down now," I instructed. "Follow the path. Keep the white sheet visible. If you see the Germans, wave it." Hayes nodded, his teeth chattering. He started to crawl. I repeated the process. I found 2 more men with leg wounds, and I wrapped them in salvaged uniform jackets, covering them enough to make them visible against the dark earth. I told them to move slowly, using their rifles as crutches. This was the final phase, mass extraction, utilizing every man's remaining strength, using the visibility of the white cloth as a shield. I was managing the flow, like a shepherd moving a panicked flock through a gauntlet. I reached the bottom of the slope just as the last rays of sun vanished. Mac's men were pulling the final 3 walking wounded into the relative safety of the trench. "How many, Miller?" Mac demanded, his face etched with exhaustion and awe.
26, I reported, leaning against the damp earth, my breath clouding in the freezing air. 26 men accounted for. 4 still up there, Mac. They're dead or too far gone to move without risking the whole operation. I need to make one last sweep. "No, Miller," Mac said firmly, grabbing my shoulder. "It's dark. The night patrols are moving. The truce is over. They'll shoot anything that moves now. You saved 26 men, Doc. That's a miracle. Don't throw it away for 4 ghosts. I looked up at the ridge. The German helmet was still visible, a dark silhouette against the last light. But the silence felt different now. It was the deep, hostile silence of the night shift taking over, a silence that promised violence. I knew Mac was right. The risk had surpassed the possibility of success. I looked at the field one last time, the dark, blood-soaked ground stretching up toward the invisible monastery. "All right, Mac," I conceded, dropping the remnants of my medical bag to the ground. "We pull back, but send runners to the field hospital. Tell them Davies is critical. Tell them O'Malley needs immediate surgery." I stepped back into the trench, the warmth of the gathered men a sudden, unexpected comfort after the cold isolation of no man's land. I was shivering violently, not just from the cold, but from the delayed shock of spending 2 hours under the sights of an MG-42. I sat down hard in the mud, pulling off my helmet. The smell of diesel and sweat and gunpowder was overwhelming. Mac handed me a canteen. "You're either the bravest damn fool I ever met, Miller, or the luckiest." I saw the Jerry helmet. What was that all about? "Professional courtesy, Mac," I managed, taking a long, desperate drink of the lukewarm water. "They let me do my job, but they made sure I knew they were in charge of the clock." 26 men. It wasn't 30, but it was 26 men who would see the sunrise, who would see home again.
The night fell completely. The battlefield, moments ago a stage for a strange, silent drama, reverted to its natural state, a dark, freezing hellscape. Then, just as the last of the wounded were being secured for transport back down the mountain, the Germans delivered their final, chilling message. A single flare shot up from the monastery ridge, hanging high above us, bathing the entire slope in an eerie, pale green light. It was a signal. And then, the heavy artillery opened up again, not aimed at the trenches, but aimed squarely at the crater, the field, and the entire area I had just spent 2 hours moving through. Boom, boom, crack. The earth shook violently. They were sterilizing the field. They were erasing the evidence of the truce. The show was over. If I had stayed 5 minutes longer, I would have been vaporized. Mac and I looked at each other in the sudden, terrifying light of the flare. "Get down!" Mac screamed, shoving me deeper into the foxhole. I pressed my face into the cold dirt, listening to the shells tear apart the ground I had just walked across. I closed my eyes, counting the explosions. They were making sure that whatever wounded were left up there, whatever evidence of life remained, would be silenced forever. The cost of their temporary respect was absolute finality. I didn't think about the 4 men I had left behind. I couldn't. I just focused on the simple, brutal fact. I was alive, and 26 other men were alive because of a brief, impossible moment of shared humanity on the slopes of Monte Cassino. But the night was long, and the fighting was far from over. I knew that tomorrow the orders would come down again, and I would have to find the strength to go back out there, because my job was patching holes, not making them. And there were always more holes to patch.
I checked my pouch. I had 1 syringe of morphine left and a handful of gauze. It wasn't enough. It was never enough, but it was all I had. And I knew deep down that the real test of my conviction, the moment where the line between medic and soldier truly dissolved, was still waiting for me in the frozen Italian dirt. The memory of Finch, the 18-year-old kid, was heavy on my mind. I had kept my promise to myself so far, but the war had a habit of forcing your hand, and my hands were shaking. The silence after the final barrage was worse than the shelling itself. It was a vacuum, cold and absolute, filled only by the ringing in my ears and the shallow, rattling breaths of the men around me. The Jerrys had made their point. The field was sanitized. The truce was over, emphatically. I sat in the foxhole, my back pressed against the frozen earth, trying to regain control of my hands. Mac was next to me, reloading his Garand, his face grim. The corpsmen from the rear were already working, moving the litter cases quickly toward the main aid station further down the mountain. "Davies, O'Malley, and Rodriguez are still breathing, Doc," Mac reported, his voice low.
They're stable enough for transport. You bought them their lives. I nodded, unable to speak. I felt hollowed out, like a shell casing. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind pure, exhausted dread. I still smelled the metallic tang of the German-issued antiseptic I had used on Davies. It was a bizarre souvenir of a bizarre afternoon. They could have killed us all, Miller, Mac whispered, looking up at the Black Ridge. Why didn't they?
They had their reasons, Mac. Maybe they wanted to show us they could afford to be civilized. Maybe they respected the risk. Or maybe they just wanted to clear the field for the night's work without wasting bullets on a medic. I pulled the remaining morphine syringe from my pouch. Whatever it was, it's done now. We need to focus on getting these men off the mountain. The movement of the wounded was a slow, agonizing process. Every man who could walk was pressed into service as a carrier, slipping and sliding on the frozen mud, trying to keep the litters level. We were a beacon of noise and desperation in the otherwise silent night. Around 2 o'clock, when the moon was high and cold, casting stark, deceptive shadows, the final group of walking wounded was being passed back. I was checking the perimeter for Mac, trying to be useful without carrying a rifle. That's when I heard it. Not the distant rumble of artillery, but the close, distinct sound of heavy boots crunching on the rocky path just above our position. 3 sets of boots, moving slowly, deliberately. A patrol. Mac heard it too. He immediately signaled his 2 closest men, Private Jones and Sergeant Hicks, to freeze. Their rifles came up, aimed into the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. The truce was finished. If this German patrol stumbled upon us moving the last of the casualties, they wouldn't hesitate. They would assume we were preparing a counterattack. The footsteps stopped maybe 30 feet above us, near where the path curved around a blasted pine tree. I could hear the faint clink of metal, a rifle sling or a helmet. "Miller," Mac hissed, his voice barely audible. "Get down. Get behind me. I don't like this." I crouched low, but I didn't move behind him. I looked at the dark shapes of the wounded men being carried away. I looked at the exposed position of Jones and Hicks. A firefight here would kill the carriers and the casualties instantly. I reached into my pocket. I still had the large, white parachute flare sheet Mac had sent up for the final phase of the extraction. It was my only remaining defense. I pulled it out, gripping it tight. A voice cut through the stillness, sharp and guttural. German. A challenge. Mac raised his rifle slightly. "Hold fire," he whispered fiercely to his men. "Wait for my count." I knew Mac was trained to shoot first. I knew that was the only rational military move. But I also knew that if he fired, 26 lives I had just saved would be jeopardized by the inevitable, brutal response. I didn't think. I stood up slowly, deliberately, stepping out of the shadow of the trench, into the weak moonlight. "Mac, no!" I said, loud enough for the Germans to hear the American accent, but not a shout. I unfolded the white sheet and held it high above my head, a massive, brilliant white flag against the black sky. I stood there, completely exposed, my Red Cross armband clearly visible on my sleeve. The clinking of metal stopped instantly. The silence returned, thicker and more dangerous than before. I could feel Mac's desperate confusion behind me, his rifle still aimed. I took 3 steps forward, moving toward the sound of the patrol. "I am Medic Miller," I called out, my voice surprisingly steady, echoing slightly off the rocks. "We are moving wounded. I am unarmed. Do not fire." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. I was a target, standing in a spotlight of moonlight, waiting for the inevitable burst of fire. Then, the same accented English voice that had given me the ultimatum hours earlier answered from the darkness. It was colder now, harder. This was the voice of the Feldwebel, the German sergeant who had commanded the observation post. "Medic, you exceed the agreement. The truce ended with the sunset." "I know the truce is over," I replied, keeping the white flag steady. "But the wounded are not soldiers now. They are casualties. We are moving them to the aid station." I paused, then added the only leverage I had left, a desperate plea to the strange, temporary honor code we had established. You saw the field. You allowed the extraction. Do not turn your back on the convention now. The silence stretched again. I could hear Mac breathing heavily behind me, ready to fire. I waited. I didn't lower the flag. Finally, the Feldwebel spoke again. His voice was laced with contempt and weariness. You are a fool, American. A dangerous fool. Then the command came, sharp and fast, back in German. Weiter, schnell. Go on, quickly. I heard the heavy boots crunching the rock again, moving away from our position, continuing their patrol path up the mountain. They were leaving. They were walking away from an easy kill. I stood there until the sound of their footsteps faded completely into the night. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. Mac crawled up to me, pulling me back into the trench. Miller, you absolute maniac. You stood up. You challenged them. They recognized the flag, Mac, I whispered, dropping the white sheet into the mud. They respected the job. They didn't respect us, but they respected the job. Respect, Mac scoffed, but his eyes were wide. They could have wiped us out. They just let us go. I didn't answer. I just checked my arm. The Red Cross armband was still there, stained with mud and blood, but intact. It was the only weapon I had ever needed. The rest of the night was spent in a blur of exhaustion and cold. By 0400, the last of the men I had pulled from the slope were on their way to the rear. I went with them. Mac insisted. You're done, Doc. You look like hell. Go get some sleep and a hot meal. You earned it. I didn't argue. I was spent.
The journey down the mountain was slow and rough. We rode in the back of a canvas-covered truck, the road barely more than a muddy track, the truck bouncing violently. I sat next to Captain Davies, keeping watch over his IV drip. He was unconscious, but his breathing was slow and steady. O'Malley was in the truck ahead of us. They had made it. When we finally reached the main field hospital, a massive collection of tents and lights set up miles behind the line, the organized chaos was overwhelming. Surgeons, nurses, and other medics moved with practiced efficiency. I delivered Davies and the final casualties to the receiving desk. I gave my report, detailing the wounds, the plasma given, and the improvised dressings. The receiving doctor, a major with weary eyes, looked at my filthy uniform and then at the list of 26 names. You pulled all these men out yourself, Miller, from the northern slope? Yes, Major. Mostly litter cases, all pinned down. He looked at me for a long moment, then down at my Red Cross armband. We got a report from K Company. Mac said you walked through heavy MG fire for 2 hours. I shrugged. It was necessary. Necessary, he repeated, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He checked his clipboard. Davies will live, I think. O'Malley is in surgery now, but he has a good chance. Rodriguez lost his leg, but he's stable. You saved them, son. You saved a lot of them. I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like a mechanic who had just barely managed to keep a failing engine running. I spent the next 2 days recovering in the hospital area, doing odd jobs, patching up minor cuts, and drinking endless cups of terrible bitter coffee. I watched the flow of the war, the steady stream of men going up and the broken men coming back down. I found Sergeant Klein 2 days later. He was sitting on a cot, his head bandaged, eating rations with surprising appetite.
Doc Miller, he called out, standing up to shake my hand. They told me what you did. You walking up there, holding that flag, you looked like Moses, Doc, like the mountain was parting for you. I looked like a target, Klein, I corrected him. How's the head? Ringing, but I'm alive. The docs say I'll be back in action in a week. They gave me a medal for getting out. I told them you deserved it more. I don't need a medal, Sergeant, I said honestly. I just needed you to live. Klein looked down, then back up at me. You didn't carry a rifle, did you? Mac told me you never do. No rifle, I confirmed. Why, Doc? It's a war. It's Cassino. We need every man with a gun. I sat down next to him, the exhaustion of the whole experience catching up to me. Look, Klein, I said, my voice low and earnest. Up on that mountain, we are all killers. That's the job. But someone has to be the one who stops the killing, even if it's just for 5 minutes. If I pick up a rifle, I become just another statistic, another man trying to make a hole. But when I walk out there with nothing but bandages and the enemy lets me pass, even for a minute, that's a victory. That's proof that there's something left in us, even in this hell. That red cross, it's not a shield against bullets. It's a promise, and I won't break that promise. Klein stared at the floor, processing it. So, you didn't save us with courage, Doc. You saved us with a promise. Something like that. I agreed. I left the hospital that afternoon. I was given new supplies, fresh fatigues, and an order to report back to K Company. The battle for Cassino was still raging, shifting, and dying. I walked the long road back up the mountain, the smell of diesel and sulfur already filling my nostrils. The weight of the new medical bag felt heavy, but familiar.
I found Mac and the rest of the company dug into new, slightly higher positions. The fighting was still brutal, but the morale was different now. The sight of 26 men returning from the dead had an effect that no general speech ever could. Mac looked relieved to see me. "Welcome back, Miller. We got a new push coming up tomorrow. The whole damn valley's going to light up." "I'll be ready, Mac," I said, tightening the straps on my back. He watched me for a moment, then reached behind his pack and pulled out a clean, oiled Colt .45 pistol. He held it out to me. "Take it, Doc," he ordered, his eyes serious. "Just keep it in your pack, for emergencies. You've proved your point up there. You don't have to keep tempting fate." I looked at the pistol. It was heavy, efficient, designed for one purpose: immediate lethal defense. It was the ultimate contradiction to everything I believed. It was the easy way out. I thought about Finch, the kid who only wanted to see the sunshine again. I thought about the German Feldwebel who had spared me twice, not out of kindness, but out of recognition of my status. I pushed the pistol back toward Mac, gently but firmly. "No, Mac," I said. "I can't. If I carry that, the promise is broken. And if the promise is broken, then the next time I walk out there, that MG-42 won't hesitate. I'll stick to the gauze. It's worked so far." Mac looked at the gun, then at me. He didn't argue. He just sighed, holstered the pistol, and spat onto the dirt. "All right, Miller," he said, a grudging respect in his voice. "Just keep that damn armband clean. We might need another miracle."
I nodded. I knew the miracle wasn't the survival of the men. The miracle was the tiny, fragile sliver of humanity that had shone through the smoke and the chaos, proving that even in the absolute worst hell man could invent, there was still a line drawn in the sand, marked by a small red cross. And that line, I realized, was the only thing worth fighting for. I checked my supplies one last time. I was ready for the morning. I was ready for the next hole. I didn't carry a weapon, but I carried the memory of 26 men, and that was heavy enough.